So I'm gonna quickly log out. I'm gonna log into one of my other characters. I'm giving props to Turbine on something. They did something just genius. Just genius. It's not smart, okay? It's not you know, really clever. It's absolute brilliance beyond belief. And this is not sarcasm. This is super genius, like, wow. Alright, so this is an alt that I have, named Quadraxian after the Metroid Prime 2 boss. Yeah, Warforged. Sorcerer. Originally built to be force damage. I made this character long time ago. Long time ago. Before they redid the sorcerer tree, and there actually was force amplification in the tree. And repair amplification. They have since then gotten rid of that for no reason, so it makes it hard to repair yourself, but whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. This character had 2 levels of Paladin, because you get to add your Charisma to your saves, which is just great. Add your Charisma to your saves for 2 levels of Paladin. That's awesome. Of course, I wasn't the only person that knew that. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that to the point where I think Paladin was absolutely the most popular class, because you would go down the social list, you'd load it up, you'd scroll it by class, and you find 2 Paladin here, and you find Paladin here, and Paladin here, and Paladin here, and Paladin. Look at all these different Paladins. There's 4 levels of Paladin in that guy. There's all these Paladins. Look at all these Paladins. People with Paladin level, Paladin. Everybody has 2 levels of Paladin. You don't even have to have a good Charisma to have 2 levels of Paladin, because 2 levels of Paladin, if you start with like a 10 Charisma or something, you get a plus 10 item, you get, you know, a plus 4 tome, because you played the game forever, and you get, you know, the ship buffs. And so now you're at 26 Charisma, so you're adding, you know, 8 to all your saves. Like, everybody took 2 levels of Paladin. Like, it makes no sense not to take 2 levels of Paladin because of how tanky it makes you. But Turbine came in and said, you know what? This is ridiculous. Because you'd have bards and sorcerers who'd have, like, 70 Charisma, and have saves that were almost 100. You'd have, like, plus 100 to all your saves. So they said, no. Divine Grace? Its max bonus is 2 plus 3 per Paladin level. What this means is that if you had a 70 Charisma, okay, that means you got plus 30 on your saves. But if once this nerf went through, you went from plus 30 to plus 8. That's 22 off your saves. That's kind of a big nerf. That's such a big nerf that it would basically make a lot of people want to instantly delete all their characters. That's like a rage-inducing, like game-changing, game-ruining, basically experience-ruining nerf. It ruins the game for you. But Turbine knew this, so they gave every single player, when they made this nerf, a little heart of wood, so that you could respec out of your Paladin levels. They give you a plus 5 heart of wood, so you can change all those levels. Great! That's super smart. So they were like, people are going to quit the game over this, so we're going to fix that. So, genius idea, really smart. But that's not where the genius comes in. Maximum bonus of 2 plus 3 per Paladin level means that if you're Paladin level 20 levels of Paladin, okay? I'm not amazing at math, but 2 plus 3 per Paladin level, 20 Paladin, that's 62. No one is going to get a 62 bonus on Charisma. No one's getting a 62 bonus on Charisma. Like, this bonus will never hit 62. There's no way to get that. That's impossible. So which means if you're actually a full Paladin, you will always get full benefit from the feat, as though you had it. So it allows the game to essentially work in the system of, you know, Charisma gives you an incredible bonus to your as a Paladin. It's still good if you take 2 levels. It was 2 plus 5 hearts? Oh, well then even better. That's even better, you know? But it means that if you're playing Paladin and you have a ridiculously high Charisma, you still get the benefit. If you have more levels of Paladin, say you took 3 for the saves, that gives you plus 11. Plus 11 on your saves is just crazy talk, even still. It's still good enough to and immunity to fear. That's still good enough to consider for the, you know, taking 3 levels of Paladin. So they were like genius in that regard. They kept it so that the class is still good, the characters are still good, and if it was nerfed to the point where you wanted to just take your headset and throw it away and smash your keyboard and punch a hole in the monitor and punch a hole in the wall, it's okay. Just redo your character, man. Don't worry about it. Just make a new build. So, yeah, per account. That's what I meant to say. So that was like genius. Genius. And I'm really happy they did that. Oh yeah, well I know it's 2 per account if you play on multiple servers, but I mean you can always TR. So I don't know if it's I just if people have mains that they've been playing for a long time, they can redo their character without having to actually re-level it or pay money. Um, but now let's take a step back, okay? Genius move. I think this was really good. I didn't think Divine Grace was too overpowered, but they brought it in line with a lot of other class abilities. So it was really good. But now we're gonna take a step into the not so genius. So Eldritch Knight, okay? Uh, allows you to use your melee as a sorcerer. So right here, I'm playing a sorcerer, rah rah rah, and I want to use my guitar as a weapon. So rah rah rah, I want to hit with a guitar. The Eldritch Knight you think would be the best way to go about that. Um, Sorcerers, wizards not generally being melee, they can get Tensor's Transformation. It's even built into the tree as like a toggle. So it makes you think, okay, this could actually be a thing. You could have a melee sorcerer, melee wizard. But, not quite the same. Spell Sword Acid, a buff that gives you acid damage to your weapon attacks. It's great. It adds 1 to 6 damage. Except 1 to 6 damage really isn't a lot. And at level 18, you're adding 4 to 16. So 4 to 16 damage per attack is negligible. It's 0 damage. It's effectively 0 damage. Because if you don't have the right imbue on, and you're hitting a target that happens to be immune, because there's multiple targets, so for example, you use elemental damage and you're fighting demons, you're doing 0 damage. So your weapon imbues add nothing. So the damage is just a little bit too low. But it's a melee, so I can understand. If you have 2 weapons, that's adding it to both weapons. So I know why they would want to make it reduced. But it doesn't scale with spell power. What does scale with spell power is the Eldritch Strike, which is great. It's great. It's that sick AoE. It does tons of burst damage, and it scales with spell power. The problem is the cooldown is really high. It's 12 seconds, so that's where all your damage comes from. Your auto attacks do like 0, and all your burst damage comes from Eldritch Strike. Eldritch Strike is 0 to 2 per character level. So 0 to 2 force, and 0 to 2 acid or fire or whatever you have on that. Being able to get 0 means that you can have a really low bottom end. Your bottom end can actually be 0. You can Eldritch Strike and do 0 damage. That's terrible. The odds are really low. If you're level 20, like, you have to lose 40 coin flips in a row. Actually, it's even worse than 40 coin flips, because there's 3 options. There's 0, 1, and 2. So there's like no chance you'll do 0, but it is possible, and that sucks. Sure, it's affected by your spell power, but it's not going to do a lot of damage. Now, the reason why this bothers me is because the Arcane Archer recently got a pass, and as you saw before, the Arcane Archer does ridiculous damage thanks to the extra bonuses you get from spell power. Right now, my character does... Actually, can I put this on the screen? Heck yeah, I can put this on the screen. So, right now, the Arcane Archer... yeah... Where'd it go? Edit. Oh, it deleted itself. Wonderful. It's also supposed to be there. Text. Great. So, on my Arcane Archer, I do 78 of damage. Where is that? Let's make this here. Let's make this big. That's a bit too big. So I get to do 78 of damage, right? So 78 on the Arcane Archer is equal to 7 to 56 damage. Let me make this background. So 7 to 56 damage is pretty good. It's like it's a pretty good amount on every single auto attack. But I don't do 7 to 56 damage, and this is really important. It's multiplied by my spell power. So my spell power is 125, so it's times 2.25. Times 2.25, which is a little bit higher. So this is going to be like, what, 14... So it's going to be like 15-ish. This is an approximation. I'm doing the math quick. But this is like 15 to like 115-ish damage. So that's on every single auto attack. The low end doesn't usually happen. It averages about 70 damage on every single auto attack. thanks to the fact that I can multiply it with spell power. Now, when you compare that to this damage right here, this is 4 to 16. Like, that's the disconnect. It's 4 to 16 damage. It's negligible compared. This damage, by the way, is going to go up. I'm expecting to do about 300 spell power, which is going to change this to 4 times the damage, which makes the math really easy. Oh, 126. So there we go. See, it's even better. But the math then becomes really easy if I have 300% spell power. So 300% spell power, I'm looking at, what is this? 28 to 224 on every single auto attack, with an average of like 125, 130? Really great. That's about level 22. I'm expecting to get that damage. This is not affected. No, you can read it right there. It's not affected by spell power. The Eldritch Strike is affected by spell power, but the actual auto attacks is not affected by spell power. The reason this bothers me is because, one, there's no reason to use Eldritch Knight. That's important, because it does so little damage. You can get points into it to get that extra physical resistance rating, to get that and to get that little bit of armor class, that kind of thing. But in general, there's no real reason to go up in this tree very high if you're actually doing like a melee sorcerer build. And even if you were, I mean, I'd recommend putting more points into fighter or barbarian or anything like that. But for a reason I don't understand, this doesn't scale with spell power on the auto attacks. Even if it was 4 to 16 scaling with spell power, that's terrible. That's terrible. With 400% damage, or with a 300 spell power, you're doing 12 to, 48 damage on your auto attacks? That's so little. That's still 0. That's still, that's not even 25% of the damage that you would be doing on Arcane Archer. Yet they're the same concept. So, I mean, obviously you get little bonuses as well. You get the Arcane Spell Failure change, you get a little bit of Double Strike. But I mean, a little bit of Double Strike, you get what, 3% here, you get 1% Double Strike here, 1% Double Strike here, and 1% Double Strike here. So this gives you 8% Double Strike. Arcane Archer gives you, 25% double shot from just the Arcane Archer tree, and then there's a second tree that can give you another 20% double shot. And it goes past 100%. So, I don't know why this is the case. You can say Arcane Archer is sucky. It's factually the highest range damage you can do with a bow, but, currently, because of the way it scales. But, either way, this is just, it's something I don't know exactly why it's the case. Hopefully, in the future, there'll be a way to actually come up with, like, a middle ground. I know obviously it's coded differently, because when you auto-attack, when you make an attack, sorry, it says right here at the bottom, up to once every 6 seconds, an attack you make that hits an enemy will cost you a spell point. So it even costs mana to add the extra damage. I kind of wish they would change it so that it would scale with spell power, so it would be a little bit better, but they haven't done it yet. They may not ever do it, but it's something I'd like to bring attention to, because consistency feels good. It's something that adds damage as an element from a magic-using class, and yet it doesn't scale with the spell power of the magic-using class, which I feel like might be an oversight. It may not be an oversight. Maybe it's intentional, but it just doesn't feel very good when you actually get to play it. I think it would be overpowered if it was the same scale, like 7d8s on every single auto attack that scales with spell power on melee. Melee hits way faster than ranged. That would be a nightmare, and it would never be balanced. But if they added just spell power scaling on these weapons, on the actual autos themselves, I think it might help a little bit, or at least make it feel more consistent. So, that's what I had to say about that one. So that's what I said. Turbine, they do incredible things sometimes, like the way they handled the Paladin. I really enjoyed, and I thought it was really smart, well thought out, because they didn't kill Paladin, and they just reduced the strength of some builds. But this is just, it's just a consistency thing. if you, I'm sure Turbine should have metrics on this. I can't imagine um, that Eldritch Knight is used by any of the player base in actual melee builds. Even melee sorcerers, I mean, melee sorcerers generally go with Air Savant, and then they go with some other multi-class like Fighter and go straight in Fighter tree, and then just use a little bit of stuff from Air Savant. So, yeah, it's something I hope I hope they fix. It's just a consistency thing. It just feels bad to know I'm playing a really cool class that I really enjoy because the new mechanic allows you for so much different options and customization. Because you can feel like an arcane archer. I can feel like, bam, I'm shooting guys with acid arrows. Yeah, man. And it's just even the idea. And then when you imagine like this stuff, like this looks awesome. So I take my wonderful guitar here, and I turn on my fire ability, and because it has a custom sprite, you can't see it, but it makes my weapons fiery. So like I can just turn it on, and then boom, I like burst my weapons into flame, and I can feel like some kind of wicked spell sword because I can run around and slash my sword that's on fire, dealing extra fire damage. It feels cool, but it sucks. It just it's not even like bad. It's like dumpster tier in damage. It doesn't add base damage. It's just dumpster tier. So hoping that's something that will get changed, or at least looked at and reviewed and talked about in the future. Um, because it may not have seemed that bad, but when you put it up against the way they changed Arcane Archer, this is just unholy in how bad it is. And then the Capstone is just the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Um, this is so bad, I don't even understand. Uh, so just to make sure everyone understands what this does, Eldritch Strike, awesome. You get this sick cleave on a 12-second cooldown, which is way too long because it costs 10 mana. Like, costing 10 spell points should be the barrier to entry. If you're out of mana, you can't cast the spell. It shouldn't be cooldown 12 seconds, so you can never spend enough mana to cast it. This character has 1300 mana. I will never run out of mana before I finish the quest, not because I wouldn't cast the spell enough to do the extra cleaves, but because the cooldown's too long. But to put this in perspective, the Capstone, Eldritch Strike grants you a power charge, and when you have 10, they're removed, and you get a 30-second buff. If I want to cast this, that takes 120 seconds, which means that's a 2-minute wind-up on my big buff that lasts 30 seconds. And my buff gives me 10% melee damage and 25 spell power. I mean, you could get 10% melee damage by taking 2 levels of another class and putting points in there instead of taking the Capstone. And 25 spell power, well, spell power doesn't affect your auto attacks, so it only affects your spin attack, and you can only use your spin attack twice during that time. So it gives you 25% damage on 2 attacks. It doesn't even feel good. It just hurts. And then it gives you 10 force spell power. So that's something that I think that should be just looked at and talked about. Consistency and how it makes the character feel. I'm not saying like, oh, make Eldritch Knight the greatest thing ever. Add stats everywhere. Just make it, give everything plus 100 melee power, spell power, killing power, death power, winning power. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying consider how the Arcane Archer works and think about how you can take that design philosophy of making something that's not only strong but cool, keep the cool, and just make it workable. Make it feel like when your character grows stronger and you get new items and more spell power, that it actually impacts your gameplay. Which is, the whole thing. When I play a character, when I add stats, I want it to just be stronger overall. So, yeah. So that's my rant about the subject. The good and the bad, And I mean, this isn't bad because they designed it to be bad. It's just, it's not as up to date as some of the other trees, so it may not look as nice and shiny. So, I'm sure something that will change.